let's continue with that. Why don't you tell us like how you got started with this, where this idea for this fantasy epic came from, and how take us on the journey.
So it started not in a place of setting out to write a book. I've always been really fascinated and obsessed with story. Uh, Growing up on the Oregon coast with three younger siblings, we were always orchestrating these kind of backyard epics where we were creating our own worlds and characters, and those characters were growing with us over the years of our lives. So I usually pinpoint my obsession with story going back to that childhood play acting. And in high school and right after, I thought that that passion was translating into acting. So I was pursuing that because I've always had a strong love of character. And at the time, I was really lured by, just film and theater and stuff. So one activity I would do to get into character would be to go on jogs or hikes and just kind of like embody that character by forgetting my body. It allowed me to kind of like shut me down and step into other characters. But as I was doing that one day, I kept getting the scene for what would be the ending chapter in of Thieves and Shadows. It just kept like usurping my whole character study, and I could not get that closing scene out of my head. So I always say it kind of took me by force. It was not something that I intended to do. It just would not leave me alone. So I loved writing. I've always been a big writer and a reader, but I didn't think I didn't have like any passionate goals to become a professional writer outside of like my casual writing and my journaling and whatnot. And it was ironically not until after I got my English degree that I kind of had this gap in my schedule. I had been going to school full time and working full time. And I was like, oh, I've got this couple of hours set aside every day that I have been using for homework and my thesis and whatnot. And like, well, I have that story that's, been following me since I was, 20. And, why don't I finally do something with it? It won't leave you alone. And I had minored in creative writing. And that was how it came to be. I finally just sat down. I spent a couple of months just reading a lot about writing and writing like practice exercises, like little workshop style things. And then I finally sat down and worked on the world and characters, and then the story came from there.
Nice. It's awesome when I feel like that's how it happens for almost everyone. Of like the all like you have no idea, you're not really even trying to come up with an idea, and
Mhm.
then like you're just doing nothing in particular, and all of a sudden you have an idea, you know, and
Yes.
then it like won't leave you alone. And like that was when I came up with my original idea of like I was working in a factory that made coffee pots, so like I was literally doing nothing, and then all of a sudden it was just like bloop, and so
Yes.
it's just so wild how that creativity happens. Do you have so since then do you have other ideas in this world, or just ideas, or like once you finish this, is there something else after that?
So I have a pretty solid idea of where I want to go with the main series. My second book's about to come out, and I have two novellas as well that are prequels. And I want to, at the very least, finish out this series with probably another two books, is what I'm thinking will happen. We'll see what the story does. I also have two other novellas I want to write eventually within it. And then as far as the world, I think I'm going to have to just kind of reevaluate once I've done all of that, because I put a lot into the world building. There's so like thousands and thousands of years that I could really work with if I wanted to tell a story, like another series within the world. But I also don't want to like I I really struggle with when other creators and shows and things, they just keep doing something for a buddy and you can tell the passion's gone or there's nothing left to be told in that
Hmm.
world. So I don't want to be guilty of that. So I'm just kind of leaving the door open on it after I finish the main series. But I do have a lot of other projects kind of percolating in the back of my mind too that I'm going to be working on probably intermittently and then after the series is over.
Yeah, it's kind of like I feel like that's been Christopher Paolini. Like he came up with he had the first four books, and then he didn't really do anything in that world forever. And then
Yeah,
all of a sudden now he's like, oh, I think I have this story that I wanted to like. That's so much better, I think, than
it's so true.
just like we have this one idea, and I'm just gonna hammer it until
Mhm.
it has nothing left. And so
Yeah.
I think that's very wise to do for sure.
Thank you. I think it's good to kind of leave people wanting. Like for me, some of my favorite series ended on a note where I'm like, oh, I want more. I wish there was more, but also it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want anything to come that's going to be subpar.
Yeah. Well, and even like as a creator, you don't want to get to a place where like you hate it either, where it's like
Exactly.
all of a sudden you're just having to create more in that world because you feel like you have to or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you can leave the reader wanting more, but also if for you as a creator, I think it's good for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you have a English degree. Did you, so you were going to act, did you plan on doing that as well? Or did that come out of like, you wanted to write? Like, how did you get into that and how'd that play in with your writing?
My 20s were just out of control.
Been there. Been there.
Yeah. So I ended up coming back. I had been out in LA for a bit, and I was studying at a conservatory there. I'd done some like commercials and smaller roles in theater and stuff, but I had some personal issues that required me to come back to Colorado at that time. And I decided, I hadn't wanted to go to college right out of high school, not knowing what I wanted to do. And so when I came back, I'm like, well, I've always loved English. It's been a huge passion of mine. And I like to do something with writing or potentially teaching down the road. So it seemed like just kind of a shoe-in as far as education went. At the time I was working in leasing, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go with it, just that I thought that'd be good to have in the bag. So I fell in love with writing again during school, though.
Mm-hmm.
I had always done a lot of like creative projects on the side when I was younger, but going to college allowed me to take a lot of creative writing classes, which I think kind of reawoke that part of me that I hadn't explored in a while. And I realized I could marry my love of like story and character along with writing. And it was kind of one of those light bulb moments. Like, why didn't I think of this sooner? It makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think, writing for me, like I kind of came to it because I love being creative. I love to tell stories, but I had been a musician for a long time. And then it kind of got to a point where like I was married, we had a daughter, and I was like, I need something that I can kind of still be creative, but it doesn't rely on too many other people. Whereas like music and stuff a lot of times can be like, you got to be in a band or you got to go play at bars and clubs. And, like it just takes so much more effort, where it was like, even acting, it's like you got to have a cast or a play or a show or like something to do, where writing was like, I could funnel that creative energy without having to bug too many people, I suppose,
Exactly. Yeah. It's a lot more flexible for sure. You can tuck it in here and there instead of spending an hour to, drive to perform at a concert or to do your rehearsal or your audition or
yeah.